From gangsters threatening movie stars in the desert to teenage daughters defending their mothers with kitchen knives, the scandals of classic Hollywood make today's celebrity drama look like child's play. From studio heads hiring gangsters to break up interracial romances to stars literally kicking gossip columnists at Hollywood parties, the golden age was packed with scandals so outrageous they sound like fiction today. We're diving into 12 of the most shocking verified stories from classic Hollywood that prove the truth really is stranger than any movie. Number 8. Kim Novak's When. A love affair literally gave a studio executive a heart attack. Here's a story that sounds absolutely insane but is completely documented. Kim Novak's secret romance with Sammy Davis Jr. was so scandalous it actually caused Columbia Pictures head Harry Conn to have a heart attack. And I mean that literally. Picture this. It's 1957 and Kim Novak is Columbia's biggest box office draw. She ranked number 6 in the annual Motion Picture Herald's Top 10 Money-Making Stars poll behind Rock Hudson, John Wayne, Pat Boone, Elvis Presley, and Frank Sinatra. What made her story even more tragic was her background. Born Marilyn Pauline Novak in Chicago on February 13, 1933. She'd grown up feeling like an outsider, working odd jobs as a dental assistant and elevator operator before being discovered. Her natural vulnerability on screen came from real insecurity about never feeling good enough, a feeling that studio head Harry Conn exploited ruthlessly. Conn controlled every aspect of Novak's life, calling her that overweight Polish woman even though she was Czech, forcing her to bleach her hair lavender, and having private detectives follow her constantly. He literally owned her under the studio contract system. But then Novak met Sammy Davis Jr. at a party at Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh's house. Both felt like outsiders in Hollywood. Novak, because of her working-class background in constant body shaming. Davis, because of the racist barriers he faced despite his incredible talent. They instantly connected and began a secret affair. Meeting at a rented house in Malibu with Davis, literally hiding under blankets in his car so no one would see him. When gossip columnists got wind of the interracial romance in late 1957, the headlines were explosive. Kim Novak is about to become engaged to Sammy Davis Jr., and Hollywood is aghast, screamed the London Daily Mirror. Harry Conn's reaction was swift and brutal. The morning after the first blind item appeared in New York papers, Conn suffered his first heart attack. His wife later said she believed that a scandal literally ended his life. He passed away 2 months later from additional heart attacks, but Conn's revenge was even more twisted. Legend has it, he hired actual mobsters to drive Sammy Davis Jr. into the desert and threaten him unless he ended the affair. The mob connections were real. Conn had ties to organized crime through his business dealings. Eventually, a deal was struck. Davis would have to marry someone else to end the story. He was forced into a sham marriage with chorus girl Loretta White, who was reportedly paid $25,000 for 1 year of marriage, though sources vary on whether it was $10,000 or $25,000. Davis went to his grave, saying Kim Novak was the love of his life. The scandal broke both their hearts and literally ended a studio executive's life. That's the power of love in racist 1950s Hollywood. Number 7. Loretta Young, the adoption that fooled America for decades. Here's a deception so elaborate it makes today's celebrity cover-ups look amateur. In 1935, while filming Call of the Wild, devoutly Catholic actress Loretta Young had an affair with married heartthrob Clark Gable and got pregnant. What happened next was one of Hollywood's most carefully orchestrated lies. Young came from a deeply religious family that had struggled through poverty during the Great Depression. As a child, Young's family was so poor that actress Mae Murray offered to take her into her home in 1918 to help them financially. Her Catholic faith was central to her identity, making an extramarital pregnancy absolutely scandalous. But rather than destroying her career with an abortion, Young chose an incredibly bold deception. She disappeared from Hollywood for months, claiming she was taking a vacation in Europe. In reality, she was hiding out giving birth to a daughter who looked exactly like Clark Gable, especially those famous protruding ears. But here's the twisted part. Young then returned to Hollywood and staged an elaborate adoption of her own child, placing Judy in orphanages for 19 months before publicly adopting her. She literally pretended to adopt her biological daughter, naming her Judy Lewis. For decades, Hollywood insiders whispered about the resemblance, but the official story held. Young raised Judy as her adopted daughter, never revealing the truth. The deception was so complete that Judy Lewis didn't learn Clark Gable was her biological father until she was an adult. When she confronted her mother years later, Young finally admitted the truth, but made her promise to keep the secret until both Gable and Young had passed away. The most heartbreaking part, Gable knew about his daughter, but was never allowed to acknowledge her because it would have destroyed both his marriage and career. However, contrary to popular belief, there is no verified evidence that he left her money in his will. He reportedly visited her once when she was 15, but they never had a real relationship. This wasn't just a personal tragedy. It shows how the moral hypocrisy of Golden Age Hollywood forced even the biggest stars to live elaborate lies just to survive. Number 6. Judy Garland. How MGM literally poisoned Judy Garland. What I'm about to tell you about MGM's treatment of Judy Garland is so horrific it sounds like something from a dystopian nightmare, but it's all documented fact. MGM didn't just control Judy Garland's career, they controlled her body chemistry, starting when she was just 13 years old. Studio executives fed her amphetamines to keep her energetic during 16-hour filming days, then gave her sleeping pills at night so she could rest. This created a lifelong addiction that ultimately ended her life at 47. The tragedy was compounded by personal loss. Garland's father, Frank, passed away from meningitis in November 1935, just as she was preparing for a radio performance. At only 13, she lost her only real protector. Her father's passing came just 6 weeks after she signed with MGM, leaving her completely vulnerable to the studio system's abuse. But it gets worse. When Garland got pregnant at 19 with musician David Rose's child in 1941, MGM forced her to have an abortion because pregnancy didn't fit their image of wholesome Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. Multiple sources confirmed this forced procedure, including Wikipedia and Vanity Fair articles documenting how her mother, Ethel, in cahoots with the studio, arranged for Garland to have the termination. Louis B. Mayer, MGM's head, literally called Garland "my little hunchback" and constantly criticized her appearance. They put her on extreme diets, monitored every calorie, and when she couldn't keep up with the impossible schedule, they gave her more pills. The psychological abuse was profound. MGM executives would force Garland to stand in front of a mirror next to a dummy of an overweight woman, telling her, "Now look at yourself. Do you want to look like that dummy, or do you want to be a star?" They bound her chest to keep her looking younger, squeezed her into rigid corsets, and gave her rubber discs to change her nose shape. The studio also controlled her personal relationships. When she tried to date someone they didn't approve of, they interfered. When she married David Rose, MGM was furious because they had planned different publicity romances for her. By her 20s, Garland was so dependent on studio-supplied medication that she couldn't function without them. She'd call in sick when she couldn't handle the pressure, leading to more punishment from the studio. In 1950, MGM finally fired her, not because they cared about her health, but because her breakdowns were affecting their profits. Garland spent the rest of her short life struggling with the addiction MGM had created. She passed away alone in a London bathroom in 1969. Another victim of the studio system that treated human beings like disposable property. Number 5. Rock Hudson, the forced marriage that hid Hollywood's biggest secret. Rock Hudson was one of Hollywood's biggest heartthrobs, but his entire romantic image was built on a lie so elaborate it required a fake marriage and constant threats from his own agent. Hudson's childhood set the stage for his later vulnerability to manipulation. Born Roy Harold Scherer Jr. in Wetka, Illinois, he was abandoned by his father when he was only 8 years old. His mother, Catherine, a telephone operator, was left to raise him alone. His stepfather, Wallace Fitzgerald, provided some stability, but Hudson grew up with deep insecurities about abandonment and acceptance. Hudson's agent, Henry Wilson, was one of Hollywood's most predatory figures. Wilson didn't just represent actors, he exploited them inappropriately, running what was essentially a casting couch operation for young men trying to break into Hollywood. Hudson was one of Wilson's victims who became successful despite the abuse. But in 1955, Scandal magazine, Confidential threatened to expose Hudson's homosexuality, which would have destroyed his career instantly. Wilson's solution was diabolical. He arranged a marriage between Hudson and his own secretary, Phyllis Gates. Gates was reportedly told this was a real romance, while Hudson knew it was purely for show. The marriage lasted 3 years of mutual misery. Some sources suggest Gates eventually figured out the truth and secretly recorded Hudson's confessions about his orientation, planning to use them for blackmail during their divorce proceedings. The most twisted part, this wasn't unusual. Wilson arranged multiple fake marriages for his gay clients, treating human relationships like movie props. The psychological damage to everyone involved was enormous, but the alternative was career destruction in 1950s America. Hudson lived his entire career hiding his true self, passing away from AIDS in 1985 as one of the first major celebrities to succumb to the disease. His passing finally brought attention to the AIDS crisis, but it came at the cost of a lifetime of enforced secrecy and shame. The producer's demise that MGM covered up. In September 1932, Jean Harlow's husband, MGM producer Paul Byrne, was found deceased with a gunshot wound to the head. The studio immediately declared it a self-inflicted incident, but evidence suggests it was actually something far more sinister, and MGM covered it up to protect their biggest star. Jean Harlow herself came from privilege that had crumbled. Born Harley and Carpenter in Kansas City, Missouri, she was the only child of a well-to-do dentist and a frustrated housewife with movie star dreams. When her parents' marriage failed and finances dwindled, her grandfather, Skip Harlow, issued an ultimatum. If Gan and her mother didn't return to Kansas City, he would disinherit them. But Jean's mother was determined to escape Kansas City and achieve the stardom she felt she deserved through her daughter. Paul Byrne had a secret. He was still legally married to a woman named Dorothy Millette, who had been living in a sanatorium for years. When Byrne married Harlow, he committed bigamy, but more importantly, he had been sending Millette money to keep her quiet about their relationship. On the night of his demise, witnesses reported seeing a woman matching Millette's description at Byrne and Harlow's house. The couple had been fighting about their troubled marriage. Byrne reportedly had intimate dysfunction that made their relationship impossible. Here's where it gets sinister. MGM mogul Louis B. Mayer arrived at the crime scene before the police and allegedly removed evidence, including what may have been a second note that would have implicated Millette. The studio then promoted the story that Byrne ended his own life out of inadequacy, humiliating him even in passing. Days later, Dorothy Millette conveniently took her own life by jumping off a ferry. Her body was never found, and she took any secrets about that night to the bottom of the river. The cover-up worked. Harlow's career continued. MGM avoided a scandal, and the truth was buried for decades. This wasn't justice. It was corporate damage control that treated human lives as expendable assets. Number 4, Errol Flynn. When Errol Flynn beat assault charges in a media circus, swashbuckling star Errol Flynn's 1942 to 1943 statutory assault trial became one of Hollywood's most notorious legal spectacles. Featuring victim-blaming tactics so extreme they shocked even 1940s audiences, Flynn's capacity for violence and predatory behavior had roots in his traumatic childhood in Tasmania. Born in 1909, he was scarred by his parents' troubled marriage and his mother's constant belittling and physical abuse. He performed poorly at school and was expelled multiple times, developing a mistrust of authority and women that would plague him throughout his life. Flynn was accused by 2 teenage girls, Betty Hansen and Peggy Sadlerly, of criminal assault. The evidence was compelling. Flynn had a documented pattern of predatory behavior. His own roommate, David Nann, later wrote about Flynn cruising outside Hollywood High School, calling teenage girls jailbait and San Quentin quail. But Flynn hired Jerry Gaylor, Hollywood's most ruthless defense attorney, who pioneered victim-blaming strategies that are sadly still used today. Gisler attacked the girls' reputations, suggested they were gold diggers, and painted Flynn as the victim of a conspiracy. The trial became a media-feeding frenzy, with Flynn's fans treating it like entertainment rather than a serious criminal proceeding. Women packed the courtroom, cheering for Flynn and booing the accusers. The phrase "in like Flynn" became popular, celebrating his acquit. Despite evidence of his predatory behavior, Flynn was found not guilty in February 1943. The trial showed how wealth, fame, and good lawyers could overcome almost any accusation in Golden Age Hollywood. Flynn went back to making movies while his accusers disappeared into obscurity, their lives forever damaged by the ordeal. Number 3, Carole Lombard. The public humiliation that shocked Golden Age Hollywood. This story comes from David Nann's memoir. According to Nann, at an elegant, all-white party, screwball comedy star Carole Lombard committed what was considered the ultimate Hollywood sin. She publicly humiliated MGM queen Norma Shearer in front of the entire industry. Carole Lombard's boldness came from surviving real hardship. Her family had struggled financially during her childhood, and she knew what it meant to fight for survival. This working-class background gave her a different perspective from many of Hollywood's pampered stars, making her less willing to play the political games that others accepted as necessary. Shearer, married to powerful producer Irving Thalberg, had deliberately worn a bright red dress to Lombard's all-white party. It was a calculated insult, showing disrespect for the hostess. But Lombard's response was nuclear. In a voice loud enough for everyone in the ballroom to hear, Lombard supposedly shouted, "Who does Norma think she is? The house hostess?" The entire party allegedly went silent. This wasn't just an insult, it was career destruction. You didn't cross Irving Thalberg, one of Hollywood's most powerful men, but Lombard had reached her breaking point with the petty power games and fake politeness that defined studio-era Hollywood. The incident became legendary because it showed the real tensions beneath Hollywood's glamorous surface. These weren't just movie stars. They were human beings dealing with jealousy, competition, and the pressure to maintain perfect public images while navigating vicious private rivalries. Number 2, Joseph Cotten, the gossip columnist who got physically confronted by a movie star. Hopper was Hollywood's most feared gossip columnist, using her column to destroy careers and manipulate stars through blackmail and intimidation. But she met her match in Citizen Kane, starred Joseph Cotten. Hopper's ruthlessness stemmed from her own difficult climb to power. Born Elder Furry in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, in 1885, she was the daughter of a butcher and grew up in working-class circumstances. She left home with virtually nothing to pursue acting in New York, enduring years of struggle before finding her niche as a gossip columnist. Her tough upbringing made her ruthless in protecting her hard-won position. Joseph Cotten, by contrast, came from Southern gentility. Born in Petersburg, Virginia, to a well-to-do family, his father was a successful cotton broker, and his parents hoped he would follow an uncle into banking. His refined upbringing gave him a code of honor that made Hopper's attacks particularly offensive to him. Hopper operated from what she called the house that fear built, her Beverly Hills mansion, where she'd invite stars for interviews that were actually interrogation sessions. She'd pilly them with alcohol while sipping tonic water herself, getting them intoxicated enough to spill secrets about their colleagues. When Hopper falsely reported about Cotton's romantic life, including a fabricated affair with teenage actress Deanna Durbin, the Jeanette Teal Southern actor had enough. He publicly vowed that if Hopper slandered him again, he would physically confront her. According to multiple sources, when Hopper printed another false story about Cotton, he spotted her at a Hollywood party and literally kicked her in the rear end in front of everyone. Some versions of the story say she landed face first in a plate of deviled eggs, though accounts vary. The incident was shocking because it showed that even Hollywood's most feared gossip columnist wasn't untouchable. Cotton's revenge became legendary, inspiring other stars to stand up to the columnists who held their careers hostage through threats and lies. Number 1, Ingrid Bergman, the love affair that scandalized America. Ingrid Bergman was Hollywood's most wholesome star, known for playing pure, noble heroines in films like Casablanca and Notorious. But in 1949, she became the center of America's biggest moral panic when she abandoned her husband and daughter for Italian director Roberto Rossellini. Bergman's story is even more poignant, and considering her tragic childhood. Born in Stockholm in 1915, she lost her German mother Fidel when she was only 3 years old. Her father Eustace, an artist and photographer, raised her alone, but he passed away when she was just 13, leaving her an orphan. She had already lost 2 siblings in infancy. By age 13, she had lost everyone closest to her, perhaps explaining her later desperate need for love and acceptance. What made the scandal particularly devastating was Bergman's carefully constructed image. Unlike other actresses who played sultry characters, Bergman was marketed as a virtue incarnate. When she left her family for Rossellini and became pregnant with his child while still married, American audiences felt personally betrayed. The reaction was vicious and immediate. Senator Edwin C. Johnson denounced her on the Senate floor as a powerful influence for evil and stated that she had perpetrated an assault upon the institution of marriage. Religious groups organized boycotts, and she was effectively banned from American films. The woman who had been America's sweetheart became its most hated actress overnight. The personal cost was devastating. Bergman was forced to leave her 10-year-old daughter, Pia, in America,